Great. Okay, so the topic that we're going to be discussing today is trauma treatment through the lens of DBT. It's a lot of information. I'm going to try my best to cover ground and also to give space for questions. If we can hold that for the end, that would be best. I want to make it a little experiential as well, if we could get to that. So there's nervousness and excitement as well, which is the dialectics. I guess we'll go with both. So we'll start with defining what trauma is, what traumatic injury is. It occurs when a person is overwhelmed by an event, a series of events, or a set of enduring conditions, objectively or subjectively perceived to be life-threatening and can change or distort one's reality about his or herself, the person around them, and causes a sense of helplessness, overwhelm, or feeling out of control. What's important to understand is it is not in the event, but it's in the body's reaction to the event. We're not here to understand the person's story, to understand our client's story. We're here to understand what this event or situation or chronicity of events caused to dysregulate this person, caused to create a traumatic injury in this person. And therefore, what we want to understand is that the trauma leaves a living legacy. These are Janina Fisher's words. She says they leave a living legacy where you see a client with an array of symptoms coming into your office, and they're living highly traumatized on a daily basis. And we're not using traumatic experiencing on a layman's term. This is really where it's integrated into their psyche, into their being, and in many aspects of their living situations, you see it come up. And so what we want to understand is that we're looking at the living legacy of trauma, that the brain and the body respond to the environment that the person is in as if it is constantly in danger. That the way the symptoms represent themselves is that it's adapted to the traumatic circumstances and they live with these traumatic symptoms on a day-to-day basis. And so what I generally want to understand in terms of assessment when I meet with a client is when you're coming in with depression, when you're coming in with anxiety, when you're coming to tell me, I don't know, I feel numb, I feel dissociated, life feels surreal, I just go through life in a daze. When a client says that to you, I want to know how this depression, how this anxiety, how has this numbing helped you survive until now? They're alive. They're coming into your room alive, which is a huge success on their part. So I want to understand, how have you used this? How have you used the survival strategy to keep you alive? How does losing hope or losing interest in everything help you survive? Because there's a positive to the negative. We're not only here to understand what their triggers are, we also want to know the buffering factors. What have you used to get you to this point? Because you're a superstar. And that's what I really look at my clients as. They're unbelievable people going through an incredibly painful experience. And I want to be there to understand them and also to give them the encouragement and support that they need. Okay, so as you can see, the common reactions to trauma are quite cumbersome. That's to say that lightly, on an emotional level, on a physical level, on a cognitive level, and behavioral level. We have clients who lose interest. You ask them, what's something that you enjoy? Nothing. Life is meaningless. Life is pointless. They have physical pain. They can't sleep at night. Intrusive thoughts. Somatic complaints. I hear this all the time. My shoulders, right? That happens a lot. Or my chest is constantly constricted. The leg is swaying fervently forward and back. It's just this tremor that I can't get rid of. This hyper-arousal all the time. I need to stay. Questions? That's a great question. I don't know. Can I think about it? Okay. Okay, so there's an emotional reaction. But you can take pictures if you want, if that's helpful. So on an emotional level, physical level, cognitive level, and behavioral level, just understand what domains we're working with. From a lens of DBT, we want to look at 3 different domains. There's emotional experiencing, behavioral regulation, and interpersonal connection. Okay, and within each one, there's a continuum. And we see clients either with emotional reactivity or emotional avoidance. Emotional reactivity would look like a client who is constantly hyperarousal, anxious, on edge. They're not here. They're not present. They're just hyper alert all the time. Life is very threatening for them. And then you have the emotional avoidant client who, in order to to avoid any pain or any experiencing that they're going through, they'll avoid the emotions altogether. I don't feel anything. I'm numb. I don't know what you're asking me. When I tell them to check in their body, it's the sense of not knowing that comes up a lot, where they're emotionally avoidant. They don't tap into their emotional experiencing. On a behavioral level, we have impulsive behavior and compulsive behavior. We'll have clients who will impulsively do something for short-term gratification. They'll go for that sexual high. They'll use drugs. They'll self-harm, cut, self-injure themselves. They'll avoid social situations, which I'm going into the interpersonal part. They'll hurt themselves in a way where what they're doing is it's impulsive. It's not thought out. It's with a lack of mindfulness. On the other side of the continuum, you'll have impulsive and then compulsive is restricted, where you'll see clients who their behavior would be to the extent of a rigidity, that was the word, where they have this constricted rigidity and over-controlled, overcompensated, and overprotective in a sense. Okay, and from an interpersonal level, you'll have excessive intimacy or excessive independence. Excessive intimacy, Brene Brown calls it hardwired intimacy, where the client is looking for this deep connection, super fast, super quick. Right there, we mentioned that short-term gratification, where the excessive independence is saying, I'm good, I'm okay on my own, right? And when you reach out as a clinician to connect with them, they just want to keep their distance. They don't want you to really come close out with them. They want to withdraw and not connect. So if you can see on all these levels, this is really where DBT taps into. From an emotional, behavioral, and interpersonal level. And what the clinician's role is in this level is how we can tap into each one of these and help a client really, we're not getting rid of the emotional experiencing, we're finding a way to create a balance. It's all about integration. That's like the key word. We're here to integrate. We're here to allow a client to integrate the level of pain together with living in the present moment. I can do both together at the same time. Okay, so diagnostic symptoms of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. There's 3 main criteria. There's re-experiencing of the trauma, there's avoidance symptoms, and there's persistent perception of current threat. So re-experiencing the trauma is that the traumatic memories are not just remembered by a client. They're lived, they're relived again and again and again. I'm walking down the street and I hear some sort of a bell, and all of a sudden my heart starts to panic and starts to constrict, or I start to feel numb, or I want to fly and run away from the situation. I don't know what this is. It doesn't match. It doesn't fit the facts, but all of a sudden I'm just re-experiencing something that I don't know where it's from. Avoidance is we can either avoid internally or externally, right? Externally is saying I cannot go to that place. I can't go to that person. I can't go to a place that reminds me of my trauma. And an internal avoidance is I can't think about that. I can't go there. I just constrict or numb or dissociate from the pain or from any reminder of the trauma itself, and therefore I avoid that internally, right? I can't think of that. I can't go there. And so anytime any form of a trigger comes up, I just want to push away that internal reminder. And persistent perception of current threat refers to having an enhanced startle effect, right? These clients are highly sensitized to their environment. Everything is triggering, everything is overwhelming, everything is emotionally burdensome. I have a client who always looks at the clock throughout the session. Like, am I getting in enough time? Did I have every minute used? Just constantly nervous. I have another client who comes in and takes her chair and moves it close to the door. For her, she needs to know that she's just close enough to the exit and close enough to me, but far enough from me. And that actually changed as time went on. There was less of this nervousness, and she was more connected and grounded. And to reflect on that, we'll get to the interpersonal connection, but to be able to be attuned to that, and as a therapist refer back to the client and say, do you remember how we started off and where you stood or where you were, and look how relaxed you look, right? So that's disconnection where they're pulling away and you're reflecting back the connection of what you're seeing, and it really, really empowers the client and makes them feel super. Complex PTSD. That's different from PTSD. It's more complex as it sounds. The difference is that complex PTSD results results from a repeated or chronic exposure. That doesn't just happen once. You're not just in one single incident traumatic experience. This happens over a long period of time, what we call developmental trauma. It happens over an extended period of time and can usually start from a caregiver, from the result of a maladaptive caregiving experience. What these criteria include are not only the three criteria we mentioned for PTSD, it also includes affect dysregulation, negative self-concept, and interpersonal disturbances. Affect dysregulation, we'll get more into this, but the autonomic nervous system, the way our body regulates itself on its own, our heart rate, our blood pressure, the body temperature, what happens is it gets dysregulated and it becomes quote unquote dysfunctional, and either we'll have, like in a car, either the gas pedal will be pushed where the sympathetic nervous system is out of whack, or the gas pedal, the brake pedal will be pushed and the parasympathetic system will be overworking itself, or you'll have clients who range between both. I'm probably talking gibberish for those of you who have never heard this before, but we'll go further on. We'll explore it further. Negative self-concept would be where, this is Dr. Rachel Schutz's words, where the sense of self becomes marinated in threat. I love that because it really depicts what the client is going through. They're literally drowning, marinated in threat. And so this is just, you'll hear clients say this all the time, it's just like, this is who I am. Right? When sometimes I'll ask a client, what brings you here? Tell me the symptoms you're experiencing. I don't really know anything other than this. This is just who I am. And that is a really, really hard thing to hear as a clinician when they feel so marinated in their threat and in their experience, their traumatic experiencing and injury, that it's hard for them to even have a sense of self. And interpersonal disturbances you'll see it's very difficult for them to form trusting relationships. So I understand how difficult that is as a clinician to develop a trusting relationship with such a client. Okay, so assessment. What would assessment look like? We want to be super curious. That is probably like the cap that I wear is humility and curiosity. We really, really want to be curious and contract to the present moment. So much of the way that they live is in the past or the future, and what we want to do is ground the clients to the present moment. What has got you here? How have you kept alive, which is what we mentioned before. We want to understand the social, developmental, and cultural factors. We want to know what the buffering factors were, right? We mentioned this. What kept you alive? What helped you get to this point? Regardless if it's adaptive or maladaptive, I just want to know it all. Maintain a healthy pace, and be aware of dissociative symptoms. Sometimes you don't even have to ask the question. They come into your room and they're gone. I don't know where they are, they're just not with you. So just recognize that, how slowly you have to go and how much you have to understand that their survival strategies, or what you call them as defensive mechanisms, are what got them here, and that's what they're going to use until they learn ways to cope better. Okay, so just take a moment to validate what our clients are experiencing in the throes of post-traumatic injury. It's not their trauma that we need to heal, it's the way that their whole system adapts to the trauma, and that's where the treatment lies. And it's really profound to keep that in mind when we treat clients who have experienced any form of traumatic injury. Okay, so John mentioned DBT 2.0. What we want to understand is that DBT alongside trauma goes alongside a phase-based treatment. That what we want to do, being trauma-informed, is not about knowing people's trauma. It's really about showing up with knowledge, mindfulness, and skills to ensure that when your client enters your little space, your tiny little room, or large room if you have one, they're able to connect instead of disconnect. Right? We're here to form a connection, to form an integration, not to disconnect from their safety, security, and stability. So the stabilization and the ability to modulate arousal is basically the foundation. We're building a house with trauma treatment. And so therefore, what we want to do is to build the foundation first and foremost, which is safety and stabilization. Yeah.
I don't want to be a troublemaker, but
and, yeah.
Whatever it was that enabled them to come into the office to get help, I think in any negative way is exactly counter to making that connection with the person.
For sure.
We have that, telepathic communication. So it's like, oh, you're being defensive. That's already, to me, a judgment. It's like, I'm not enough. I got myself here, and you said all those great things about what a super person I am. And then this blows me out of the water when you really feel like, oh, you're so defensive.
Right, 100%, which is really what highlights the dialectic, yeah, right? Where it's, you don't say you're so defensive as a therapist, you'll say, right? Like, what was that? Those few last words that you just said. Do you want to say that again? I'm curious what that's about, right? And so there's the curiosity, there's the attunement, right? And again, these clients are so intuitive. They know exactly when you're not being authentic. They know when you really are doing your therapist-y thing. They know when you're really connected to them. So authenticity is number one. You really have to develop your own language when you're dealing with these clients. And they get it. They really feel it. Like, also, you can have this sort of irreverent nature with these clients as you move along, but they're highly sensitive in the beginning, so you have to be super careful when you're working with them. In the beginning is to just meet them where they're at, right? I'm not coming with an agenda here, which is tough if you need to, if you're working for a clinic and you have an intake session that you have to get all the information down and present it very clearly and concisely. That's really hard, but keeping both in mind is also important. Thank you for sharing. Yeah.
That's really a broad question to the entire topic. We talk about post-traumatic stress disorder, or conflict post-traumatic stress disorder. Can we get the word post out of it? Current example, a client is traumatized by a constant expectation of sirens and afraid to leave the house because their house has a mamad and outside home they are unprotected. They traumatize, but it's not post.
Right. It's a really hard question because when you're dealing with trauma, one of the big staples are that the trauma can't be continuously experiencing that trauma, right? You can't have somebody in an abusive situation and you're going to go and process that experience because what are they missing? The foundation. There's no safety and stability. So what your work with that client is really creating a sense of helpfulness instead of helplessness, which came up a lot during the war. Clients felt really helpless, and so what we wanted to work on is the trauma is not over. We're still, as a country, we're living day to day with this constant pain and constant arousal, like you're saying. We don't ever feel safe. So what can I do? In what area of my life can I feel helpful to create a sense of safety, right? Can I when I walk into a supermarket, can I look around and see where the cheder mamad is? When I'm home, can I keep track of just keeping those few things in the room to know that I can always go there and have some sort of security for myself and my family, right? It's just going from a place of being completely helpless to helpful in that sense. So no, we're not post in this situation. Post would be where the trauma is over, which is what we're all praying for. Okay, so stages of treatment in trauma-focused DBT. I'm not really going to go into this, but Deblinger, Cohen, and something with an M. Those were the three psychologists who came up with trauma-focused DBT. We'll focus really on stage one. This is really the most important. That lends itself into any trauma modality that you use. I'll always create a sense of stability. I'll decrease the life-threatening behaviors. You can't help a client process any trauma if they're self-harming in a way that's really, really not safe or maladaptive. You can't process a trauma if somebody's currently in an abusive situation. What you can do is work on creating safety and stability, and that's what we're going to focus on. So the importance of safety, the importance of stabilization is safety and control. You want to give the clients an ability to feel some sort of control or safety over their body, in the environment, and a sense of emotional safety. I don't feel all over the place, right? Like a client described it as feeling like a blob. Just my emotions just melt me. I can't contain myself. And so we want to give them a sense of control, of stability, of containment. I want to also help clients prevent re-traumatization. When I do EMDR or use a sensory motor psychotherapy aspects, or whatever it is that I go into with a client in terms of the processing stage, I want to know that I'm not going to re-traumatize this client, which is really tough, because there are times where I'll always go back to revisiting stabilization. Like we try navigating, try creating a target sequence plan, let's say for EMDR, and even in discussing some sort of a memory, the client's out. And so I realized we have to go build the foundation again. We haven't built a strong enough foundation. And then for empowerment is amazing. Clients are coming to you depleted. They're done. Their cup is full, their stress is overloaded, they're overwhelmed. And so what we want to do is contain them and empower them. Like, you have skills inside you, and that's what we're going to go into, is we all have resources, we all have skills to help ourselves. And so the way I look at this is I want to understand stabilization within the context of a window of tolerance, where we have the optimal zone of the nervous system arousal, and we have hyperarousal responses and hypoarousal responses. And so a neat way of looking at it is with this picture. Sometimes I'll just take out a piece of paper and I'll draw 2 lines and give a little bit of psychoeducation, and I'll tell a client, take a look at this, show me what your arousal looks like on a day-to-day basis. Oh, I'm always over there. I'm always hyper-aroused, alert, on edge, irritable, angry, enraged. That's me. Or you'll have a client who says, I don't know. I just don't know. I don't feel anything, I'm numb, I'm constricted all the time. Those are the clients who have insufficient activation to integrate. They're found on the bottom. And what we want to do is work on building this window of tolerance. I call it the insurance policy to life. People who have a wide window of tolerance can get through anything. That doesn't mean that we're here to avoid pain. We're here to not get to avoid uncomfortable, overwhelming situations. We're here to get through them. And so the way we do that is building a wide window of tolerance. And so it's sometimes helpful to check in with yourself. What does your window of tolerance look like? A lot of times we'll oscillate between both. Bessel van der Kolk, he calls it biphasic reaction, where clients will go between the top and the bottom, and you'll have a client who comes in pretty dissociative, numb, constricted, and all of a sudden you say something that triggers them, or they have a memory that pops up into their mind, or the way you're sitting annoys them. And then I'll have this client go into this rage, irritable rage, and she's swearing, and I have to go and close the windows, and yeah, it gets a lot of fun. Sometimes the clinicians next door can hear it, specifically with one client in mind. It's a lot of fun to be subject to that, but imagine just putting yourself in their situation and understand where they're at in terms of the window of tolerance. So this is just a worksheet that can be helpful. This is from the sensory motor psychotherapy training that I took. I don't really use this. It's pretty extensive, overwhelming, which is not what I want to do to a client, but sometimes I'll just draw those 2 lines again and ask a client to draw their window of tolerance. How are we doing? Good? Okay. And so what we want to focus on are resources. Resources put the gap, this is it, they put the gap between environmental stress and personal distress. There's different types of resources. There's top-down resources, the bottom-up resources. We use our resources all day long, right? We're feeling on edge, we're getting uncomfortable, this speech is boring, I want to straighten my back and kind of ground myself. You use the resource. You're feeling extra tired, you take a deep breath and you exhale. That's a resource. You don't even realize how resourceful you are. Imagine as clinicians how we don't realize how resourceful we are. Think about our clients, right? So what we want to do is bring out these resources from within them. There's top-down resources, which are DBT, a lot of DBT skills. Cope ahead, checking the facts, problem solving, safety plans. These are things we throw out with clients all the time. Or you'll have bottom-up resources where you talk about the physical capacity or the actions that clients can take, which is more of a somatic, sensory motor, tuning in with the body itself as a resource. It's used as an intervention. Ricky Bernstein gives the analogy of a meadow that's never walked upon, right? And so the first time you walk upon it, you're kind of going to get scratched and hurt yourself. You're not even going to make a dent in the grass. If you keep walking down that path over and over and over again, you're going to create a neural network, kind of this path that you look back and say, oh, I know where I came from, I know where I'm going. And that's the beauty of the brain. It's called neuroplasticity, that you're not stuck. The brain can remold itself. Neurons that fire together, wire together. When you create a new habit, a new a new experience and you repeat and repeat and do it again and again and again, you create that neural pathway in your brain and you can go there instinctively without even thinking it. So yeah, it's hard in the beginning, but what's encouraging is that you can get to it involuntarily at one point, which is really helpful to know. Okay, so we're going into the modules. This is fun. Using an IFS, EMDR, and somatic experiencing lens. Okay, so we'll start with mindfulness. Mindfulness is the most beautiful experience that a person can have in their life. It's changed me as a person, and it's not just a skill, it's a way of living. To be able, and I am not mindful all the time, absolutely not. I was cutting onions yesterday, and I threw the onions out instead of the peels. So that's the epitome of how not mindful I can be. But this is something we try and foster on a day-to-day basis. So it allows us to observe our mental and emotional and somatic experiences. It allows us to anchor in the present moment. There's so much in the past, re-experiencing their past experiences, or so much future tripping. I don't remember who used that term, but I love it. Like they just go on this ride and roller coaster about the future and what ifs. Just, sweetie, stay with me here. We're here, right now. Just breathe. Like you and me together. And that is something so comforting, just to be mindful of that. We want to build somatic resourcing from a cognitive, emotional, and sensory motor level. Okay, so through our cognition, through our emotion, through the 5 sense perception, which is just the sensory functions, the smell, the taste, the sight, the touch, all of that. Movement, Ricky Bernstein's favorite, she loves it. And in-body sensation. These are basically called the core organizers. They help somebody navigate any experience that they go through. When we're integrated, all these core organizers work together. When we've experienced a trauma, what happens is that our bodies conflict and send really conflicting emotions. We'll have some sort of butterflies in our stomach, and the thought of worthlessness comes up. And so what the mind will do is, because they can't deal with these two conflicting experiences, it will numb or push away a certain experience and kind of overcompensate with something else. So we want to be able to integrate. Again, that's the word. We want to integrate all of these experiences together. Okay, how are we hoping? Okay, so maybe let's do a little mindfulness together. I invite everybody to find a comfortable sitting position. Sorry, we're on a race, and we also want to ground a little bit. So do whatever you need to do to help yourself ground, whether it's stretching your back, taking a deep breath, feeling your feet on the floor. Usually we encourage everybody to do mindfulness with your eyes open. There's so much around you and so much to take in. I'm going to invite you to all close your eyes. If you feel comfortable to do so, if you don't, that's okay. And allow yourself to take a deep breath. And don't forget to let it out. Because that's what calms us, that's what relaxes us. It's the exhale. And just recognize what it feels like to feel your feet on the ground. Wiggle your toes if you need. Just gain that contact to contain you in the present. And trace yourself all the way up to your sit bones and how you are supported by the chair you're sitting on. You didn't even ask for permission, it's holding you. And notice what that's like to be held by something. And travel yourself up all the way to your heart. And see how your heart and your lungs are working to keep you here in the present moment. And let that breath just settle inside you and anchor you. Like it always does. And give yourself that self-compassion. That you're doing the best you can with the tools that you have. And that you're good enough right here, right now. And slowly open your eyes and turn to anything particular in the room that catches your gaze. And turn your head to kind of orient yourself to the room. And just notice how we made our way from inside to outside and what that feels like. Okay. That was a basic, simple mindfulness exercise. I call that, it's a form of containment, right? I use things that hold. Your shoes are holding your feet. The chair is holding your body. Your heart is being nestled in your body. Your breath is being taken care of and working itself through your body. Right? All of these are forms of containment, just using that to contact with a client. Like, are you with me? Take that breath and breathe it out. Or orient yourself to the room and notice something in the room. That's also really helpful. It's a form of grounding. Something I really want to emphasize, I don't know if I use that language particularly now, is we want to also give them the choice to do this. If you feel comfortable, if you're willing, try, and if you'd like to, right? We're never, ever forcing a client to do this. Let's do this right now, right? We always want to give them the choice. Think about the choice that they never had when they were traumatized or when they experienced any form of traumatic injury. This wasn't their choice. And so what we want to foster is this ability to choose. I can choose if I want to do this or not, and that's okay. I'm good enough if I choose. Present orientation, use the room, use your breath, use the clinician, your voice. Sometimes I do that. Can you hear me now? Are you with me? Right? Like, use yourself as a tool as well with a client. What sounds in the room do you hear? Like that immediately. Any form of somatic reminder that you're together with them in the present moment is grounding for a client. You can even awaken their social engagement system. We have a vagus nerve that travels through kind of our face, throat, heart, belly, and using that as a form of regulating and grounding is also helpful, just to tune into that experience and what's going on inside. Right? So many times we're numbing, like, oh, there's butterflies there, like, oh, you'll be fine, you'll be okay. I know, I really feel anxious right now. Let me notice that and not do anything about it and just be okay with it. Just giving myself permission to experience is helpful. Okay, distress tolerance. Distress tolerance involves learning to observe and stay present with difficult feelings, tolerating distress, intensity, crises, resisting urges to react or behave impulsively. And most importantly is to learn to accept painful experiences, that they're not permanent, they're uncomfortable, they're not permanent, and difficult experiences eventually change. That is like hugely groundbreaking for these clients. Like, no, when I am in pain, it never ends, it never stops. And what we have to learn together with a client is that no experience lasts forever, things change. And so these are the basic skills of distress tolerance. I like to use all of them. They're all super helpful. The stop skill, the tip skill, stop, take a deep breath, observe, and proceed mindfully. Tip is tipping the scale, tipping the temperature, intense exercise, paced breathing, and progressive muscle relaxation. There's the accept skills, there's self-soothe skills, there's improve skills. It's loaded, like packed. And there's so many resources we can help clients with. And obviously, most importantly, is radical acceptance. I use this all the time. We use radical acceptance without us even thinking. It's such a helpful skill because there's so much of reality that we can't change. And so the way we get through it is by radically accepting it. It actually allows us to live with a sense of peace. This is just who she is, right? When they're constantly complaining about so-and-so, mom, spouse, dad, like, this is who they are. I'm not here to change them. And then all of a sudden, it makes you look inward. Like, okay, so if I can't change my experiences, what can I do to help myself? So again, they become helpful instead of helpless. So what I really, really focus on, which is from EMDR, an EMDR training that I took, is containment. We don't really have a skill that's called containment, but I really, really focus on this in terms of building stabilization. And that is putting away any trauma-related experience. We have push away in DBT, which is saying we're putting away something for now, but I like the word containment because it just feels more comforting. And so the way we want to do that is we want to push away, we want to put away the trauma-related experience that we're having aside, and we'll come back to it at a different time when you feel more regulated, when we have more time, right? This many times happens, like 5 minutes before you're already over time with a client, then all of a sudden they do this doorknob blurb. I don't know what they do, but it's like the elephant comes out, or they start to regurgitate some sort of a very important and very explicit experience that you want to go through. And so you can't really work through that right now. So what you'll do is you'll say, okay, let's contain this. This is really, really important. We want to get to this, and our time's running out. So again, you're reinforcing boundaries, and you're also validating and empowering them. Like, let's put that away. Either you could write it down and close that journal, you can observe the disturbing thoughts getting further and further away from you, or you can put them in a storage container, which that's the one I use very, very often. Should we do it? I'm trying to think if we should experience that together. Maybe we'll do a different one together. But what I'll do is a container, I'll use EMDR, tapping. Tapping allows the client to rest and digest. It mimics REM, the rapid eye movement that we experience when we go to sleep every single night, which allows us to process and solidify any experiences that we have. And so what I'll do with the client, when we slowly tap something in, which is around 6 to 8 taps, slow, tapping could mean either tapping yourself like a butterfly hug, like this. It could mean sitting on a chair and tapping your feet up and down. It could mean tapping, as long as it's bilateral, right? We have the right and left working together. Tapping could be on your feet, on your thighs. Yeah, exactly. Butterfly like that on the thighs. You can do it with your client. I personally don't. That can also help when the therapist taps on the client. And so what we'll do is I'll tell a client to create a container in their mind. If they're not great with imagery, I'll draw it with them. Take out a piece of paper and let's draw this container. Okay, so think of a container. I like it to be big, okay? It doesn't have to be huge. Some clients always tell me, no, but I need to bring this around with me. I need to know that I can always access this when I need to. It's kind of a security blanket. So make it small, whatever works for you, okay? I want it to be strong, really, really strong. Think of what color it is, what size is it. I want to know that it's big enough for me to fit in sometimes, right? Sometimes I'm just a mess. I want to go in there. And that's also fine. So that's also helpful. And I want to have 2 valves where I can put things in and take things out. Okay, and I'll tell a client to create that in their mind. And think of their container and share it with me. Tell me what it looks like. Tell me what color it is. Give me more details. Where is it placed? Can you hold it? And then what does it feel like? Then I'll ask a client what does it feel like to be able to use this on a constant basis whenever you need, to always have this as a resource whenever you need. And they'll share that sensation or that experience. And then I'll ask them to create a name for it if they need, or to put it in an even safer place, to put a lock and key under it, whatever they feel like they need in order to enhance it even more. And once they're holding this image in their mind really strongly, I'll tell them to tap it in. Tap in that experience. I use those words, like tap that in, and then I'll process. What does it feel like for you afterwards? And if they have a newfound appreciation of something, or like, wow, I never had such a thing like that. Tap that in. Like, tell me more. Go with that, right? Like, that's something I just keep enhancing that experience so that whenever, either when we're working on the foundation still or when we've gone to phase 2 of the treatment, when we're actually processing, we'll always go back to that container because session ends, the processing is never over. And so sometimes we'll actually encourage clients, can you put that in the container until we meet next time? So that's containment. Stop, I like to enhance it a little bit, and I call it stop, drop, and roll, snap, crackle, and pop. So I kind of like bring your cereal box wherever you go. Stop, take a deep breath, observe what's going on. We really focused a lot on like taking a deep breath, but really the calming effect is the exhale. Just like keep that in mind as a clinician. We're like, take a deep breath, right? No, breathe it out. Like, I want you to sigh. That was really groundbreaking. Ricky Bernstein shared that. She's like, we're very focused on breathing in, but we need to get rid of some of that tension and oxygen, and so we need to breathe that out. So we stop, take a deep breath, and then we drop, which is distracting or relaxing the nervous system, and that's through any skills or resources that we want to do, whether it's intense exercise, paced breathing, containment, whatever we need to do to contain ourselves, and then we roll. Roll with the punches is using imagery, using the brain's power to harness best case scenario. That's something that I'll use a lot with clients. I'll say, go to the best case scenario right now. Hold that with me. Or I'll ask them, let's do this step by step, right? I don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. I don't know what the post-Chag will bring. Let's think about today. What skills do you need to cope through today? And that's pretty much cope ahead. Okay, imagery. Something that I really, 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 really love to use is part of the improved skills. I like to use the imagery throughout our work together, but pretty much creating the sense of coping through emotionally trying moments. So the improved skills we have imagining something, meaning prayer, relaxing one thing at a time, taking a vacation, or using encouragement to help a client get through things. I like to focus on the I, which is imagery, and that you can either use as creating a safe place with a client, imagine yourself coping through something really trying that's coming up, or imagining a painful situation flowing through you. And so I'll ask a client to close their eyes and try and go back to a time or to experience what it's like to where they felt a sense of joy or goodness, and can they go with that, right? It could be simply running on the grass barefoot, or allowing the sun to bake on you and what that feels like, sitting at the beach. If they don't have a place, I have clients who say this all the time, like, I don't have joy in my life, I can't go there. So let's be creative, let's go. And that's really like, pick your favorite color and splash the room with that. And who we bring into this room. And what do you need next to you in this room? And what does your chair look like? Is it a beanbag? Is it a hammock? Like, just be creative. It's so, some of us are not so the creative types, so we have to really stretch ourselves, but it's very helpful. Like, clients enjoy that playful aspect as well. Then we'll go into emotion regulation. That's identifying intense unfamiliar emotions. Either you have a client who over-identifies with their pain, or you have a client who doesn't feel pain at all, they're both really tough. We're trying to get them to that middle of emotional experiencing where we got this, where we can feel everything and can get through anything. And so something really, really, really powerful. This is actually from the polyvagal theory. Donna, I actually heard it from a podcast from her. It's part of accumulating positives, but I kind of call it a glimmer. We're so used to priming clients off. What are your triggers? Let's do the chain analysis, the links analysis. Like, we're very primed to know what clients' triggers are, what their vulnerability factors are. What we don't really focus a lot on is knowing what their glimmers are. What are moments in your life that shape your system? They're internal or external. They allow you to appreciate life with a sense of okayness. Like, it's not safety, but it's the sense of like, that out-breath, that sigh, that renewed energy. And we want to focus more on that. It could allowing the sun baking on you. An example that I had recently is I was walking out of my office, and it's in between two buildings, and I took like 3 steps, and all of a sudden the sun hit me. It was glorious. It was really glorious. It was a hard session, and I was like pretty much into myself. And the sun kind of hit me at that exact angle. And I just stopped for a second. I don't know if anybody saw me, but I just took it in. It was a moment, probably 5 seconds, but it was a glimmer. And it just set me back on track. It kind of gave me the sense of okayness. Another thing that happened was that it was pretty early. I was heading out of the house, and I was taking care of a bunch of things, getting this ready and that ready. And I took my coffee with me, and I got into the car, and the entire coffee spilled on me, in me, around the car, like everywhere. Just made sure that I could drive pretty much. And I picked up the cup, and there was 1 sip left. First of all, I stank. Like, forget about the coffee stench, and I had to deal with people for the rest of the day. But there was 1 sip left, and like, I drank that sip, and it was so good, so good. It tasted so good. It was a moment of a glimmer for me. And if you become a glimmer seeker, you'll find these all the time. You'll find these moments of joy in your life, and think about these clients who are so primed to think of, what are my triggers? How can I get through life? How can I get through this? When they're open to seeking this, they're almost, these tiny moments appear more frequently. It's just really powerful. Yeah.
Solution-focused group therapy. So I often will give a client a warning that next time I see them, I'm going to ask them about what went well. So like, I might ask you next time about glimmers. It's not homework, you don't have to do it, but just a suggestion. I think it's very powerful.
I love that, right? The clients are used to coming in saying, okay, stressor of the week. Those are the clients who, you're in this holding pattern where you're just trying to close the fires that every single time they pop up. Those are tough situations to be in. But when you're in this realm of like, okay, where were we last session? Let's get going. Let's go there. It's very helpful for a client to come in and feel like, tell me something positive about your week. And I don't know what language, it depends on who the client is, but you have to be very sensitive. Like positivity might not work for them, or gratitude or appreciation, it might be. That's why I like the word glimmer. It feels very gentle. Okay, and then we want to understand emotion dysregulation as a part. This is where IFS comes in. This is taken from Janina Fisher's flip chart. If you don't have it, if you use trauma work in your sessions, I really highly recommend you get it. It's very, very clear description of what goes on in the room with the client, and sometimes just showing them what they're experiencing is helpful, where you have a part of the client that's going on with their normal life, and then you have their traumatized part of their personality. And sometimes just allowing clients to acknowledge that these are parts of themselves is really helpful, right? Where they say, nobody would even know I'm going through this, right? Yeah, exactly. That's your normal part of your life, of your personality, where you're working hard, you're overcompensating sometimes, you're people's pleasing, everyone loves you, you're the bee's knees of society, and at the same time you have this intense fear or shame or worthlessness or hypervigilance, and it just doesn't make sense. So just putting that out on the floor to a client. I'll sometimes draw a conference table. Sometimes my paper comes handy. I'll just throw it out, right? And I'll draw a conference table. I did this with one particular client. It was groundbreaking. And I said, who's at your table today? Mind you, she put her eating disorder at the head of the table, and there was no food on the table. But it was just groundbreaking for her to see, like, how do I live with so many parts of me so loud all the time? And so just tuning into that is really, really helpful. And that can be used to understand the emotion and the dysregulation as well. The Living Legacy of Trauma flip chart. I think that's what it's called. Okay, and then we have interpersonal connection. I'm over time. Okay, 2 minutes. Interpersonal connection, interpersonal effectiveness, where we have give, dear man, and fast. Those skills are really helpful for clients, but what I use in terms of the trauma work and the foundation is really the connection between therapist and client. And that's where I want to focus on attunement, respect, choice, and reflection. Just reflection, tuning into the client, understanding them, being with them, understanding where they're at, meeting them where they're at. I get you, I understand you. I'm here to work together with you. We're fellow travelers. I'm not a preacher. I don't know more than you. I know just as much as you know, and I'm here to learn together with you. Respecting them. They're living superstars. They've been through so much. I'm respecting that. Yeah, they are. It is. Right, sometimes I say, I wish I had a cape in the room, like you deserve to wear one on a day-to-day basis. Giving them the choice, that is so, so important. You tell me what you're ready for. I'm with you. That gentleness and reflecting connection in place of disconnection. There's so many times that they're tuned out. And so when they're tuned in, grab it. Like it's a hook bait. You have to grab it and tell them, like, do you see how you're sitting? I have one client who sits with her feet over the couch. And for the first time, she started to sit like grounded. And I don't think she even noticed it until I pointed out to her. I'm like, look how you're sitting. Wow. Right? And like, just take a look at the way you're grounding yourself on your own. I never told you to do this. Your body told you to do this. You feel more ready. It was really powerful. And so we'll end off with the great Aesop's fable of the wind, the north wind and the sun. And they were arguing who's more powerful. And the wind and the sun all of a sudden saw a fellow traveler with a scarf and a coat. And they said, let's see who could get him to take off his coat faster. And so the wind starts to blow and to blow and to blow. And guess what the man does? He grabs his coat and brings it closer to him. And he blows harder and harder and harder. And the man grabs his coat and brings it closer. And the sun says, let me show you. And so the sun comes and slowly, slowly he warms the air and the environment. And the man, within no time, takes off his coat and then a scarf, and he's done. And so what does that tell us? That encourages us to use gentleness and compassion when working with our clients, and understand that there are times in life where we want to take on the wind. We want to be fierce. We want to be strong. We want to, take on all our capacity. But remember that the sun did his job much better, much faster. Thank you so much.